Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Huddersfield Planning Committee, and we'll start straight away. Right. Item 1, membership of the subcommittee. Are we all present and correct? Or I believe we have a substitute.
Councillor Monroe.
Hello. Yes, I'm substituting for Councillor Anthony Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of previous meeting. Somebody prepared to move? Move. Seconded? Seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Declarations of interest and lobbying. I'll start with Councillor McGuinn.
Yeah, page 133 and page 103. For the first one, I've just received emails about the application of Moorbottom Road. For the second one, I have been involved in pre-planning application talks with the planner, with the architect and residents of Almonbury. And I'm not sure whether I should take part in the vote, but Deborah, would you want to comment? Deborah, can you hear us?
Right, Councillor Bellamy, would you like to?
None, Chair.
Councillor Bamford?
I've had emails on items 9 and 13, no advice given.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, again, I've had emails on items 9 and 13. In each case, I've responded I will make any decision on the basis of evidence produced to this committee.
Thank you, Will.
Likewise, emails on items 9 and 13.
Councillor Monroe?
None. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On item 9 and 13, emails received, no advice given. Subsequently, on item 13, a follow-up text was sent to my phone to see if the email had been received, and I responded back saying yes, it has been received, and I'm not willing to comment at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Sauer?
Thank you, Chair. Same item 13. I received email, no action taken.
Thank you, Chair. The same 9 and 13. For 13, I had an email and a text, but no advice given.
Councillor Sokol?
Email from item 9, Dingle Road, on page 77. But I acknowledge that email, but no advice given. Second, on page item 13, page 133, I got email from the objector and the text message as well, but no advice given. But I just acknowledge the email. Yeah, but I want to say, Chair, the objector who are sitting here and myself, we are well known each other.
Yeah, item 7, Pentlands, had a number of email conversations, if you like, with for residents over a number of months, simply passing on their queries to the planning officer and also providing information to them, but not making any comments around and explaining my position on the committee. So that's all that.
Councillor Homewood.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I had an email in relation to item 9 on behalf of the applicant and action taken, and similarly I had an email and text in relation to item 13. No advice given or anything. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, I have received an email on agenda item 13. Apologies. Thank you.
Right, sorry, Councillor McGuinn, can you just repeat again that issue you had? Was it on page 103, was it? Yeah. Item 11, just clarify again what you were saying, please.
Talks with the planner, with residents and the architect about this particular plan.
And did you express any views or?
No, either way, we're trying to get a resolution to the, we're encouraged to do pre-application. I was trying to get a resolution to the problem.
Okay, so you'll have an open mind in terms of...
I have an open mind, yeah.
That's fine, so that'd be fine then, thank you.
Right, we'll move on then. Admission of the public.
Yeah, it's open to the public, yeah.
Public, yeah. Item 5, deputations, petitions.
None received, Chair.
Public question time.
None.
So we move on to planning applications, but before we do, I've got a couple of applications that I'm seeking deferment, and the first one is on page 133, or should I say no? We'll take them in better order than that. Page 77, the Dingley Road, Edgerton. I would like the officer to explain why.
Thank you, Chair. This has been requested to be deferred as set out in the committee update. There's been a query about land ownership and certificates that have been submitted, so the agent has requested that the application be deferred just to fully investigate this issue to ensure that any decision made by the local planning authority is a sound decision, so I've recommended it to be deferred at this moment.
Right, members, what is your feeling on this? If we haven't got something solid, I can't see the point in us debating. So, is somebody prepared to move deferment in that? Moved and seconded. All in favour?
So that's unanimous, Chair.
133, that's 8 to 10 More Bottom Road. Once again, we've got some complications.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, again. With this one, there's been some indiscrepancies in the plans that have been highlighted sort of a bit late in the day. So, again, in the interest of a sound decision to ensure that it's an accurate decision, we're recommending that it's deferred and these matters are resolved before a decision is made.
So, once again, members, deferment. If we're getting inaccuracies, I can't see the point, because it could still be deferred after that. So, have we got a moved and seconded? All in favour, please show. Thank you.
All right, can I just confirm, is that unanimous? Does anyone not agree with that decision?
Just a comment more than anything. I mean, I'm happy to agree the decisions, but I'm just a little bit conscious that these decisions or inaccuracies have come so late to the table, where members of the public have submitted planning applications, it's gone through the various checks and verifications, and then at the 11th hour we found that there's a discrepancy. Surely those discrepancies would have been ironed out earlier on down the line before coming to committee. It's just a comment. I'm happy to support the officer's deferment, but if we're going to continually get that at committee stage, I just think it needs to be looked at. Thank you.
let's just say we don't want it to be habit forming, because we have got a couple here that have come to speak to it, and they weren't aware of it. The applications, I'm going to start off with page 13.
Chair, just before I go, can I just confirm that if anyone was attending for those applications, you're free to leave if you wish. Of course, you can remain in the room if you want to, but effectively that's it now. Okay.
Excuse me. Sorry, I'm sorry, I have realised that I have actually received an email on agenda item 11 as well on stock. It was in September though, and I haven't been involved in any of the negotiations. All right, thank you. Thanks.
Item has been deferred now, I think. Is that correct? Yeah. Your application, sorry, which application are you here for, sir? Yeah, but which application are you here for? No. We're just going to pause just for a minute whilst Philip just sorts out that gentleman in terms of his hearing.
Right, well, we'll go back to where we were, and it's page 13, which is Pentland New Mill Road.
Good afternoon, my name is Richard Gilbert. It is correct for me to start, correct? Yes? Yeah. Good afternoon, my name is Richard Gilbert.
Please. Can we have some order, please? Thank you. Please go across
Good afternoon, my name is Richard Gilbert. I'm a new senior planner in the planning department. First, I'd like to quickly note that a lot of the work that has gone into this, getting this planning application ready to go in front of members was conducted by my predecessor, Chris Carroll, and I'd just like to take a moment to thank him for getting it to the stage that he did. As for the application, it's for full planning permission for the demolition of an existing dwelling known as Pentlands and for the erection of 15 dwellings with associated access taken from New Mill Road to the northeast of the centre of Holmfirth itself. The application is presented to the Huddersfield subcommittee as the site is larger than 0.5 hectares in size in accordance with the council's scheme of delegation. As you can see, the red line boundary of the application fronts the western side of New Mill Road to the south of the former Midlothian garage site and extends west along the access route to the residential property known as Glenview. It then bypasses to the southern side elevation of that dwelling, extends south and returns back towards New Mill Road via the boundaries shared with the residential properties both Wincliffe and 1C New Mill Road. Overall, the application site has an irregular shape and measures 0.52 hectares in size as previously mentioned. The shaded orange area on this slide presents the extent of the housing allocations designated within the adopted Kirklees local plan.
The red line dividing the orange area denotes the separation between the former Midlothian garage site to the north and the Banksville Pentlands allocation to the south, which is referenced as HS 189 within the local plan, and which is an indicative yield of 12 dwelling houses. As members will note from the previous slide, the allocated area extends further west of the purple line, indicating the westernmost extent of this application's red line boundary, whilst at the same time excluding the curtilage of the Pentlands dwelling house. In respect to the characteristics of the site itself, and as previously mentioned, the site consists of both the Pentlands dwelling, its surrounding garden space, as well as the grassland field defined as Banksville on the Ordnance Survey map. Most of the site is set on lower ground relative to New Mill Road, which is approximately 2 metres higher, and set on top of the stone retaining wall, which continues at a right angle across the northern boundary of the site, and which previously featured semi-mature trees along New Mill Road prior to their felling recently. In terms of the surrounding area, it is predominantly residential in character. It's typified by a large mix of styles and sizes from most eras, including terraces, semi-detached and detached dwellings, spanning from the Victorian through to the contemporary periods. The use of natural stone as a finishing material is the prevailing shared feature typical of the Holme Valley area. In respect of the development that is proposed, it is being subject to a significant number of revisions that I will run through now to provide context to how the latest site layout has been achieved. The site plan presented here represents the original submission layout of the scheme. Members will note that no through road is provided to the remainder of the allocation further west, and that the 25 residential dwellings proposed includes back-to-back housing in its northeast and southeastern corners on the right-hand side. Given the issues with access and the style of housing proposed, amendments were sought which provided the revised layout on this slide. Although the back-to-back housing was retained, this revision provided by the applicant reduced the number of units to 21 by including an increased number of detached units and moving the parking from behind the plots facing New Mill Road to a position adjacent to the highway boundary. The access was also revised to enable a through route to the remaining section of the allocation further west, while space for a refuse vehicle to manoeuvre and leave the site in a forward gear was also evidenced as per the tracking indicated on the plan here. A further revision was required due to issues with the previous highway layout in that it was too narrow and circuitous. This revision responded to the highway's issues identified by slightly widening and simplifying the route, while also removing the back-to-back housing so that the total number of units proposed dropped by a further 4 dwellings to 17 dwellings in total. The highway layout has been confirmed as acceptable by KC Highways officers, subject to conditions that require details relating to the composition and construction of the proposed access road to a standard that can be adoptable, as well as measures to ensure the stability of New Mill Road. The new highway will also be subject to a safety audit. A penultimate revision to the layout responded to the surface water drainage attenuation required for the site. The layout of the access remained largely the same. However, 2 further dwellings were removed in the northern half of the site to enable the placement of a sustainable drainage system. This had the added benefit of enabling on-site public open space to come forward as a part of the development, which was not previously proposed and which will be discussed in more detail shortly. This is the proposed drainage layout that is subject to, this is the proposed surface water drainage layout that is subject to pre-commencement conditions to finalise matters relating to the practicalities of connecting the site to the River Holme to the north and west. The blue square presents the attenuation tank, and the area in yellow denotes the easement above which development restrictions apply, hence the removal of the 2 dwelling houses previously sited in that location. This site layout presents the final site plan as issued to members for this committee meeting. Some minor amendments have been made to improve the quality of the development appearance from public vantage points within the site, including provision of stone boundary walls in lieu of fencing at the rear of plots 1 to 7, indicated by the red lines on the plan. There are also improvements to the design of the side elevations of plots 5 and 6, either side of the access road, outlined by the red circle. This amendment allows for compliance with the recently adopted House Builders SPD, which requires corner plots to have multiple active frontages on account of their prominent visible position. The final amendment outlined by the light blue circle was a response to officers' request to remove plot 1, which is the northernmost detached dwelling from the scheme. This request was made in order to further increase the space between the dwellings facing toward New Mill Road as required by the House Builders SPD. The street view and materials palette on this side slide provides the impression of the site's appearance in respect of materials. These include a mix of roughly hewn stone, sawn-faced ashlar and cedarwood cladding for the elevations, with dark grey tiles proposed for the roof slopes. The street scene from New Mill Road presents the applicant's response to the request to remove the detached plot from the scheme. The applicant's counter proposal was to combine plots 2 to 5 on the right-hand side to form a terrace of 4 units to enable more space between plots 1 and 2. This amendment meets the space standard required by the house builders SPD. Terraced housing is present to the north-east of the site further up New Mill Road, so there is precedent for this form of design to be included within the proposal. Nevertheless, the gap between the 2 plots of semi-detached houses on the left-hand side of the street view remains suboptimal. This final slide presents the biodiversity enhancements proposed as a part of the development, and though it does relate to the penultimate revision of the site layout, these details will be finalised subject to a condition requiring full landscaping details prior to commencement to ensure that the biodiversity net gain and public open space contribution calculations are correct. It should be noted that native trees are intended to replace those lost along the New Mill Road frontage. To date, a total of 30 neighbour representations have been received in response to the Council's consultation and subsequent reconsultations, which highlighted a broad range of issues including highway safety concerns, biodiversity and habitat loss, residential amenity and privacy issues, as well as loss of character to the area, to name the most common factors highlighted by local residents. In terms of planning gain, the scheme is bringing forward a full affordable housing component of 3 units, 2 of which will be social rent and the other will be intermediate. This meets both the 10-year split and total number of dwellings identified as required by those in need within the Holme Valley for a site of this size. A sustainable transport contribution is also made of approximately £17,000, 7 of which is allocated to funding sustainable travel incentives, with £10,000 allocated for the upgrade of the adjacent bus stop. As mentioned previously, the proposal is not able to demonstrate a sufficient level of on-site public open space nor an achievable 10% biodiversity net gain, and an agreement in principle has been reached with the developer to provide contributions to fund off-site improvements elsewhere for the net gain and off-site open space. That being said, recent revisions to the layout, as previously highlighted, have been able to introduce some open space on-site, and this momentum is hoped to be carried through with a comprehensive landscaping scheme to be submitted prior to commencement of the residential development. When viewed in the planning balance, the scheme has been reduced in density significantly from 25 to 15 units, which is a 40% reduction. Though at 15 units, the scheme is 3 units above the 12 dwelling site yield set out in the local plan. This is significantly below the housing density required by local plan LP7 and just below the density of 30 dwellings per hectare required by the Holme Valley neighbourhood plan. The proposed dwellings also exceed the internal space standards promoted by the council in respect of the nationally described space standards. Officers acknowledge that there are potential issues in respect of the spacing between dwellings along the frontage, as well as the loss of trees in the same area, which is regrettable. However, it is perceived by officers that the aforementioned policy, compliant density, sufficient internal space standards, combined with the latest revisions to include on-site open space, improved stone boundary treatments in public areas and active frontages for corner plots, helps to offset the spacing and tree loss issues. The site is also providing the affordable housing needs and 10-year split required by the local community, and will be subject to further landscaping details that will seek increased planting of native trees across the street and open space of the site. Subsequently, officers have weighed the positive and negative aspects of the proposal in the round to form a recommendation of approval to members of this application. The logic behind this reasoning is not to dismiss the flaws within the scheme, but to recognise that the site is an allocated site with challenging constraints that has the potential to contribute much needed affordable housing to local communities in the Holme Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Quite breathtaking, that, wasn't it?
Sorry.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, ladies, I don't suppose anybody's given any thought to the sewage system in our district, which is, speaking to people at Yorkshire Water, is getting to a point where it's bursting. Every time we put new houses up, we're getting sewage bursts. I was at one not a month ago that had burst for the 4th time on Rycroft Lane at Scholes. 1,000 gallons of raw sewage in the road, and Yorkshire Water haven't updated the sewage system in the last 30 years. Apparently the idea there was that we aren't going to update the infrastructure, we're going to leave it as it is. Well, the infrastructure in Owen Valley South, most of the main infrastructure is Victorian and Edwardian, and I've got to tell you, I've seen some of those sewer pipes. They are past their best, and we're coupling new systems onto them. There's houses at Pentland in Newmill which is overbuilt anyway. I would have opposed those 15 houses anyway as being overbuilt. And then we look at Glenview, even more properties at Glenview. Does anybody realise how many cars pass along that road between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning and 4:30 and 6 o'clock at night? We're infested with vehicles. The traffic jams and the standing traffic. I live at the side of the 635 and we have to close the windows, and it gets worse every time. So I'm just saying to this planning authority, to the committee, please think long and hard before you give the go-ahead for either of these two plans, either Pentlands or Glenview. They're both the same. They knock one down and build 15, knock one down and build God's amount how many. It's all new properties on sewers. And the sewerage system in the Home Valley has got to a point it isn't fit for purpose. And until Yorkshire Water and this council gets onto Yorkshire Water to get the infrastructure right, then we've still got this problem of burst sewers. And I get sick and fed up of trailing out at 7 and 8 o'clock at night to a burst sewer, specifically when it's about second or third burst. Nobody seems to bother. Houses just kept getting passed. They're fine. Let's pass more and more. People need houses. Yes, they need houses, but they need them in a proper situation. At the moment, we're overrun with cars. I just can't understand it. Anyway, this is it. Just think long and hard before you give the go-ahead for any properties of any amount in Owen Valley South, because at the end of the day we're all going to have to pick up that tab. And the story about leaving this planet being a good case as we do when we've all gone, we're not going to be living in any good case at all. We talk about global warming, climate change. The more houses you build, the less chance you have of climate change, for goodness sake. It's all, pie in the sky. You can make anything fit anything if you want it. And I'm here to just say, please remember, do not start, because it's the committees, the planning committees will be the ones that have passed these things. Think long and hard before you pass anything. And remember, we are overbuilt in Owen Firth. I say, our sewage system, there was a sewer opened up not over long ago. They asked me to go and have a look. There was a sewer pipe there at the bottom of Soodhill that was made by Epworth Iron Company about 150 years ago, and Yorkshire Water refused to replace that sewer system because they said it was too expensive. Within 4 years of these people coupling that house up with raw sewage all at the bottom of Soodhill and in Newmill, and it took them about 5 weeks to get it sorted out. And it's unhealthy. It is not a healthy situation. I guess there's more burst sewers now in 2021 than there was in 1821. Thank you, Terry. That's me done. Thank you.
I've been told that somebody's phone keeps going off. Whoever it is, please see to it. Jake Hinchcliffe. Have we got, not to do with the phone, if you want to speak.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm Jake Hinchcliffe from Orange Design Studio. We form part of the design team working on this application. As discussed, we initially submitted a pre-application consultation which received positive feedback from officers and consultees. Given this and the allocation of housing on the site in the adopted local plan, we progressed this to a full application submission. Subsequently, after the consultation process, we received further constructive feedback from officers and consultees regarding the density and the layout. We have also taken into account a number of comments received during the public consultation process. The proposal now seeks for the demolition of the existing dwelling and access and creation of a small and contemporary development of 15 homes. The site presents 3 units available for both intermediate and social housing, alongside biodiversity and public open space contributions, as well as a number of on-site enhancements which will assist in forming a well-balanced site. The proposed house types are largely in keeping with the surrounding area and are of a contemporary style, using local materials to help contribute to the street scene and the wider Home Valley district. As discussed, there have been a number of technical challenges with the site relating to drainage during the application process, which have inevitably caused delays, but working closely with our consultants, planning officers and the council's consultees, this has allowed us to overcome these challenges for a positive outcome. Excuse me. Secondly, as discussed by Richard earlier, we've worked closely with officers to overcome the issues surrounding LP5 and master planning, making sure we don't prejudice or sterilise the adjacent remaining housing allocation. To conclude, the proposal now seeks to build a good quality and well-planned development on an allocated housing site that will contribute to the area and much needed local housing stock. I would respectfully ask that the application can be supported following the planning officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, members, and thank you, Chair.
Members. Councillor Hall. And then Councillor Harvey.
Am I okay? Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, it is an allocated site. I'm a little confused, and maybe it's me that's not read it clearly. Comments made by the lead local flood authority. Them comments don't mean anything to me, and I think I need a bit of a better breakdown of what they're trying to establish and what they're trying to say, because if they're saying that there isn't a problem and everything's fine and rosy, then I personally would have a few issues with that. So could I get a bit of a better breakdown on page 27, 8.1, lead local flood authority? Thank you.
Yeah, we do have Paul Farndale on the line, but just to intervene for now till Paul comes on, we have added conditions for a lot of the drainage issues that remain, so the development wouldn't be coming forward until those details are satisfied, and the lead local flood authority wouldn't discharge the conditions that we've applied, the officers have applied, based on the lead local flood authority's recommendation. So, and also Yorkshire Water have also applied their own conditions for that in respect of the foul water that the member mentioned as well. But I don't know if Paul's available to come in and go into more detail on the issues of the site in respect of drainage.
I do believe if that becomes conditional, I mean, that I would think would be probably a small comfort to Councillor Firth, that it certainly, to me, certainly sounds as though it's got to be.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said at the end there.
It needs doing. Does this flooding drainage problem?
Yeah, they're putting in, I think, 1 to 100 plus 30% for climate change attenuation pond. That is kind of future-proofed for surface water drainage. The main issues are in relation to third-party agreements and connection of the attenuation pond via the Midlothian site to the north, which outfalls then into the Holme River. So that's where the main issues lie in terms of the engineering. There are some other minor aspects in terms of if there's a blockage somewhere and things, but as I said, these are kind of issues that are covered by condition and will require details to be submitted, and the development won't come forward unless those conditions are discharged.
Okay, Paul, can you just try speaking again, please, and you can obviously come in at this point.
I think this is where you say testing 1, 2. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right, okay. If I could take sort of a broad picture of the difference between foul and surface water drainage, because it would cover the aspects raised by Councillor Firth. From this site, the foul drainage is pumped to an existing sewer in New Mill Road. Now, in terms of capacity issues, the lead local flood authority won't comment because that's a Yorkshire water system. Now, foul drainage, unlike surface water, doesn't contribute anything like the volumes that are involved in rainfall. And just give you a quick example, a single household will contribute foul drainage, say when you're washing up, but only when you pull the plug. When your washing machine's on for an hour and a half, it's only when it drains before the spin. When you go to the toilet, obviously it's when you flush. Now, to get heavy flows of foul, all the houses have to do this at the same time, which it's a law of probabilities. So the actual volumes are very little. But Yorkshire Water get a say in terms of where they connect to, and they've approved it, but have actually done for foul drainage a discharge rate condition that they believe will not prejudice their system. In the wider context for Yorkshire Water and burst and sewer escapes around the region, clearly sewer escapes can occur for a number of reasons. One of them will be blockages, which can be cleared. One will be collapses, which can be repaired. But also, as noted by Councillor Firth, there can be capacity issues. Now, Yorkshire Water, under the Water Industry Act 1991, have to effectually drain their area. They also have to report to Ofwat, the regulator, where there are capacity issues that flood houses and flood areas. So areas being roads, driveways, gardens, etc. From that, they have to produce a 5-year plan that is approved by Ofwat, and they will probably ask to raise their charges to the public to fund such 5 years plans. What I'm saying here is that there's a system in place, whether you think it works or not, there's a legal system in place for Yorkshire Water and the regulator to decide on how much is invested in the system to effectually drain their area. Now, if we could come on to the site itself, when I say that the foul water doesn't contribute very much, simply because people don't synchronise their toilet flushing, for example, surface water has a much greater impact on sewer systems, because rainfall obviously hits the area at the same time, and rainfall can be light, or it can be the storms that we've been experiencing in the last 2 weeks. So it can actually produce vast volumes of water that can quite easily overrun sewer systems if we didn't attenuate the flows. So in terms of attenuation, we mean that we're going to throttle back the flows, and on this site it's to the lowest that we can, reasonably practical, and the storage is there so it can be released slowly, because when you release quickly, it's the peaks of flows that cause the flood. This system is reliant on the development which is currently undergoing adjacent at the old Midlothian garage site. Now, that site, for members that have been around for some time, has been looking to be developed for certainly throughout my time at the council, which is now 12 years. I think I first came across it when Tesco's wanted to build there. And in the applications that come before and the research that went on for those previous applications, it was discovered that a piped watercourse comes in from above New Mill Road and through that site, the Midlothian site, and was in a state of disrepair. What the Midlothian site does is renew that site, so you've got a completely new pipe system that outfalls to an open water course, which is in a V-shaped valley north of the old railway line, which then goes underneath into the River Holme. So you've got a new system there. Now this site will have to has put forward plans to connect to this system. That will need third-party approval, but in terms of what's in front of me, that if we can restrict the flows to that new pipe that doesn't touch anything that Yorkshire Water own, it's a watercourse, It's brand new. It's been renewed, and that can get it to the open section at the minimum flows. In other words, we can't do any more in terms of flow restrictions than the bare minimum that we're allowed to. If we go any lower than that, the way that the technology is configured is that the hole sizes will be so small that they would easily block and create a flood risk in themselves. So in my mind, in relation to Councillor Uller, I don't know if he wants to come back, Chair, to quiz me on a specific aspect of what he needs clarification for, but to rest assured that the surface water that could cause the most problems is throttled down to the bare minimum and does not go into Yorkshire Water's existing systems.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let's just say in the event something happens and a pipe bursts and we've got sewage all over the place, who's responsible for that then? If you're saying that Yorkshire Water is not going to touch their pipes, they've got nothing to do with it, their infrastructure is old, we've got this magical pipe that's going from A to B that's going to be brilliant and help with flow and management and sewage and everything else. I mean, I'm not a sewage expert, but in that event, whose responsibility is it then? Is it the developer's responsibility to do additional flow and testing to ensure that it's correct? Or is it Yorkshire Waters? Because Yorkshire Water are going to come back and they're going to say, well, ain't not to do with me. We're not touching these pipes. So I'm a bit confused about how that is going to work in the event of something happens, because we've got to look at, you know, there is 15 houses going on here, and there are a few more going on elsewhere. But I'm just conscious about, in the event of something going wrong and something happening and pumps not working, who deals with that then? Is it the developer?
Through you, Chair, Council has mentioned sewage, so I'm assuming he's talking about foul, because that's what sewage means. That goes pumped to a Yorkshire Water system. So the system, in terms of, if you're thinking, if there's a pipe burst, Yorkshire Water on the existing system will repair that pipe. You do have private pump stations on this development. I've got to be a little bit careful here. I'm the statutory consultee for surface water only, so I'm just giving you a broad picture of how the foul system or how the foul system works in terms of approvals for the foul system in individual plots. That will come under building regulations and building control. It'll be up to the owners, just as it is for everyone else's foul pipes within their own gardens, to maintain their own pipes.
The developers also agreed in principle to set up a management company which will manage and maintain any land not within private curtilages or adopted by other parties for surface water and foul drainage infrastructure until formally adopted by the statutory undertaker. So they will be bound down by a legal requirement to have a paid for maintenance company for that aspect until it's adopted.
Yeah, sorry to keep going back. I mean, you must find this really frustrating, but I really need to get to the bottom of it. So the developers have said that their management companies is in place, and any issues they're going to take care of. Is that correct? In terms of the drainage and the sewage and the foul and everything like that? Or are we saying that these are developed and there's going to be a management fee attached to every homeowner, so when this goes wrong, it is the responsibility and the onus of the homeowner to get it fixed, or the developer? Which are we saying?
It is the latter, but obviously until the statutory undertaker adopts it. So, but there will be a management company. Obviously, I don't know the extent of what any fees would be, but they would be legally bound to have to provide that, and that is obviously sensible recourse.
We'll move on now, shall we? Councillor, are you happy with that? Yeah, right. Well, I've written it down here. Yes, Councillor Upple, sorry.
It's okay.
I've just had Councillor, Uppel, thank you.
No worries, Chair, thank you. Firstly, thank you for your detailed presentation. It was very good, and the report is very, very detailed as well. So, okay, great stuff. Well, yeah, it was good reading it. He's definitely covered, I think, everything, or she has covered everything that needed to be covered.
Councillor Uppel, can I just remind you, no crosstalk. Thank you.
I don't what, sorry?
You're cross-talking with the...
Oh, sorry, I need to talk to you. Apologies. Okay, yeah. So, I was also going to raise drainage and flooding as well. I'm not sure I'm any clearer, having heard everything, than I was before. I guess all I want to know is that that officers are reassured that the right steps are in place around the flooding and draining issues, just because on 10.57 what you are saying is the site is complex, it's subject to off-site private agreements with potential unknowns in respect to this development's impact on the ability to develop the remaining part of the site from surface water drainage perspective. So I just want to know there's a high degree of confidence from yourselves that you've covered what you need to cover around drainage and surface water, because I'm not an expert on that. And I guess the other quick points I wanted to make was the open space. I mean, you've got some more on site now, and with obviously though you've with this new plan, there's more open space on the site, but there's still expectation for off-site contributions because it's not what we would expect at this level. Is that correct?
Right, in respect of your first point, the development won't be coming forward until Paul, who was speaking earlier, is satisfied as a representative of the LLFA to discharge the drainage condition. So that's a pre-commencement condition, and development won't be able to come forward until satisfactory details to tie up the loose ends are satisfied. In respect to your second point, the reason the public open space is the contribution is subject to the type of open space, and this hasn't been fully clarified yet, and obviously the landscaping details will be forthcoming, and again a pre-commencement condition, so we will need those before development can come forward. So the contribution that's been provided could go up, but it could go down depending on the quality of the public open space that comes forward. So if it's just a turfed area, then the contribution will be higher, but if it's semi-improved grassland with more wildflowers, for example, then obviously the contribution will go down because they're investing in the public open space on the site. So that's the way forward on that.
Yeah, my question are already answered by the previous officer there, so I'm okay.
Councillor Davies.
Yep, thanks. I'd also like to add my thanks to Planning Officer Christopher Carroll. I think he's done a fantastic job, certainly in the responses that he provided to me, and the responses to residents were excellent. And I'm pleased to see that we've got the density down well below our limits as well. So I think that's all positive. And it seems from what we hear in that there's been a very constructive partnership with the developers, which obviously bodes well when it comes to conditions and the application of those conditions going forward. The question I've got is around the climate change area. This is 10.9, and at this stage, again, unless I missed something, it does seem that we've not got any details provided at the moment by the applicant in terms of the figures for the amount of energy, water, materials, etc. will be saved. And also I'll be interested in what the approach is to that, but also whether there is anything we can do in terms of conditions around the type of energy that will be used in the property, or the type of mechanisms that will be used for creating heating, etc. And obviously I'm referring to things like heat pumps, etc. So be very interested in that, because clearly that fits within the Kirklees planning documents and also the neighbourhood development plan, which has just been passed.
Right, rather than having a crosstalk now, I'll call Councillor Homewood, and whatever questions can be answered, they can be answered together rather than backwards and forwards or across and across.
Thanks, Chair. To be honest, I didn't really have a question. I was just going to say that obviously there's quite a lot of complexities in this one on the drainage, but also there's some information as well about biodiversity and the requirements there that need to be conditioned. So what I was going to, similar to what others have said, I think there's obviously been a lot of work done here to get the right level of density and to work through all these issues and put the conditions in place. I think looking at the application and the layouts, I mean, there still looks quite a lot of properties that have pretty minimal amenity in terms of garden space, for example, which, you know, I think could be better, but I kind of trust that our officers have done that work to make sure we're getting the best best we can get within, and you know, the developer wanting to get as many units on site as well. So I was just going to suggest that on that and on the basis of the conditions, that I'd be happy to move that we approve the application.
Are there any further speakers? Yes, Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a bit of a fear, especially when management companies are mentioned. Having dealt with a fair few management companies on developments, and you find that most of them are absolutely miles away from down south or somewhere. They have absolutely no interest, they have no idea of the complexities of the area. And I was just wondering, is there any way that we can put a condition on that this management company has to be local or come from the area? I presume it's probably difficult to do that, but having tried to deal with them in the past, when you've got residents ringing you up and complaining, then they cannot get hold of the management company, or the management company is 400 miles away, so they don't come out. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Law.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I would support what Don has said in terms of the management company. I think we need some clear actions of what their role and responsibility is in the event of anything happening or something happening. And if those conditions were to be attached, then I would be a little bit more comfortable to support second James's proposal.
Laura, bring the officer in then. Is there any further? There are. 3. Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having listened carefully to the debate, I'm not at all satisfied that the drainage stroke, effluent stroke sewage situation has been properly addressed. As it stands at the moment, I feel unable to support this application because of the lack of a cohesive approach to those issues. Thank you.
Councillor Lee Richards.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, does this fit in with the neighbourhood development plan that we were asked to approve last night? Or did they have any comments upon it? Thank you.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you. I just wondered, in relation to the conditions, condition 1, 3 years to commence development, how realistic is that in the light of delays in the purchase, being able to purchase building materials, the scarcity of building materials, and the fact that they are rocketing up in price?
No further points to raise. I'll now let the officer come back.
In respect of the materials for climate change, there's limited mechanisms under planning with the MPPF to kind of push developers. They have to unilaterally come from the developer, which is obviously problematic in that extent. There are electric vehicle charging points coming forward to obviously reduce emissions in terms of individual journeys. Also in terms of heating homes, heat pumps, etc. This kind of heating and water heating is generally dealt with under the separate legislation for the building regulations. So there's limited mechanisms under planning that we would be able to pull forward, and would probably lose an appeal on it, unfortunately. And hence why it's not pushed more hardly, but not pushed harder through the planning system. In respect of the management company condition, there is possibly scope within the 106, because this does need to be agreed with the developer still. But as for conditions, that would probably be in terms of having a local management company. I think we could push this into the possibility into the 106 discussions, but it might be anti-competition if we added it as a condition. So I don't know where legally we'd stand on that. So I might have to bring Deborah in. However, in terms of the 3 years for materials and getting a hold of materials, they would just have to resubmit the application if it expired. So, and obviously if they put it in exactly as it previously was, then and it was approved, then it would be dependent on how planning legislation is moved on, subject to that. In terms of drainage, Paul has mentioned that management companies for surface water is on every major site to collectively look after the drainage until such time as the water company adopt the infrastructure. Before 2015 this didn't happen, and it was up to the developer if they were still in business. So obviously, as officers have said, the management company is hopefully a temporary solution until the statutory undertaker adopt it. However, it is there as a kind of backup in the eventuality that the statutory undertaker doesn't adopt it. So it's not the most ideal situation, but it's the best one that we currently have at the time being, and it's better than having nothing. And obviously, hence why we require it to be agreed via the 106.
Right now, the legal officer wishes to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, the point about the management company being local, no, we can't require that, but what we do normally do in the section 106 is require a telephone number to be made available, and basically points of contact for the residents to be able to get in touch with somebody to come out at all hours. And of course, the residents management company is generally just an insurance policy before the drainage solution is adopted. So in short, we can't require them to make the management company be local. All we can require is that the articles of association of the company are adequate. Thank you.
In terms of having management company stipulations in a condition, these can be flouted as a breach of condition, whereas as a part of a 106 there could be more punitive measures for the management company not holding up their obligations, for example. So that's why it does go through the 106 as opposed to via a condition, which other local authorities do.
Right, well, it's been moved. Councillor Davis, your final word.
Apologies, I know I'm lengthening this. I have to come back to the issue on the climate change issues. I understand absolutely what you're saying and realise the position we're in terms of our ability to enforce things. However, I absolutely see no reason why we should not be asking this developer to actually give us a view around how energy efficient the properties will be and how close to zero carbon they believe that could be. That's absolutely, to me, a reasonable condition. And if frankly, if that's not forthcoming, then I have grave concerns about what they're doing. I'm sure it would be forthcoming from what they've already done. So I do understand, we can't enforce them to fit heat pumps until legislation has changed at national level, and hopefully that'll change quicker than has already been planned. But certainly I think that conversation and those conditions should be in there, and we shouldn't be just sitting back and saying, well, they haven't provided that to us. And for me, that fits within the SPDs and within the neighbourhood development plan as well.
If I can go back to, so there is a requirement for EPC ratings, again, separate legislation via building control. So again, if we impose conditions and it was appealed, then again, as you say, enforcement problems would ensue because you're not supposed to impose conditions that are covered under separate areas of legislation. So again, that's the reasoning behind not bringing those forward.
Oh no, it's been moved. Councillor Homewood moved it. Councillor Ola conditional. So just what we've got on this. Well, I'll need to put it to the vote. That's all. It's been moved and conditionally seconded.
Do you want me to go around?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to confirm then, so it's been moved by Councillor Homewood, conditionally seconded by Councillor Allah, and that's for the...
Is that our legal officer? Well, perhaps you can allude to us what it is.
For clarity, I'm saying that I'm happy to second it, provided those conditions are in. Deborah's then said a management company isn't possible. It's not whatever it is. The officer, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name. Richard, who's done a sterling job, has said that the more efficient way is to go through the section 106, which I'm happy with. So therefore, I'm happy to second it, provided that condition's in, which I think Richard said he has. That's my understanding.
Okay, so on that basis then we have got a mover, which is Councillor Homewood, and Councillor Allah has seconded that motion to accept the officer recommendation as outlined in the report. So I'll go round now, if that's okay, and take a vote. So we can start with Councillor McGuinn. Abstain. Councillor Bellamy.
Against.
Councillor Bamford.
Against.
Councillor Armour.
Against.
Councillor Lee Richards.
Abstain.
Councillor Monroe.
Abstain.
Councillor Allah.
For with an extremely heavy heart, but the legal officer will probably come back and say I can't have a heavy heart. I don't know what to think no more. Yeah.
Councillor Sawa.
For.
Councillor Uffle.
For.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Lyons. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for, 3 against, 3 abstentions, so that officer recommendation has been moved.
Thank you. So we move on now to page 51, which is Lancaster Lane Brockholes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Stuart Howden and I'm a planner and I'm the case officer for this application. So the application seeks planning permission for the erection of 9 detached dwellings with associated works at Lancaster Lane, Brockholes. The application was originally called to a subcommittee at the request of Councillor Greaves, who had concerns with the non-adoption of Lancaster Lane and the potential implications this could have on the maintenance of the road as well as highway safety. Officers consider it important to stress here that the adoption of Lancaster Lane is not for consideration under this application. The Council can, however, request that the road is to an adoptable standard, as officers have recommended in condition 14 at the end of the report. As outlined in the written update, after the publication of this report, the applicant's agent has stated that the applicant is content with such a condition in this instance. And since the calling in of this application to Planning Committee, an appeal against the non-determination of the planning application has been lodged with the Planning Inspectorate, and the Planning Inspectorate will now determine this application. However, as part of the appeal process, the local planning authority is required to inform the Planning Inspectorate as to what decision it would have made if the determination of the application had remained within its remit. A resolution from the Huddersfield Planning Subcommittee is sought on this basis, therefore. So the site comprises a roughly triangular shaped parcel of land between Lancaster Lane and New Mill Road. Lancaster Lane itself, which runs to the west of the site, is a public right-of-way. The site is unallocated within the Kirklees local plan. The site is accessed off River Home View to the south, but pedestrian access can also be achieved from the north off New Mill Road. The locality has a predominantly residential character, predominantly beyond Lancaster Lane. To the east are residential properties belonging to River Home View, comprising of 1 to 2 storey dwellings constructed from stone under tile roofs, and to the south of the site is the residential property of 238 New Mill Road, which is covered in trees around there and shrubs. And further to the south of this is land allocated for housing in the local plan, and this benefits from planning permission for residential development. There are no protected trees on the site, but there is one large mature protected sycamore tree to the south within the grounds of 238 New Mill Road. So just to go through a few photographs of the site for a bit of context. The photo on the left is taken from the end of River Home View to the south of the site, and this looks northwards up Lancaster Lane, and the site is behind the trees there. The photo to the right is taken further to the north Lancaster Lane and clearly displays the site. As displayed in this photo, to the right the land comprises of overgrown brambles and scrub, and it rises relatively steeply from Lancaster Lane to the left to New Mill Road to the right. The properties of River Home View are shown to the left of this, they are to the left of this photo, but they're screened by trees in this instance. The photos on this slide look southwards down Lancaster Lane. So the photo at the bottom right there shows New Mill Road to the left and Lancaster Road at the start there to the right. The top right photo is taken further down Lancaster Lane, with the residential properties of River Home View visible to the right hand side, and the left photo is taken even further down Lancaster Lane, with the site clearly visible in view, and in the distance you can see the dwelling of 238 New Mill Road. And the last photo here displays the site from New Mill Road to the east of the site, with the properties of River Home View beyond this, down the slope. So the next slide displays the proposed layout of the development. A row of 4 properties are proposed perpendicular to Lancaster Lane in the southern part of the site, which is shown on the right here, and the other 5 properties are proposed to front onto Lancaster Lane, albeit at a slight angle to it. The land is proposed to be regraded to accommodate the development, and a number of retaining walls are proposed. So here it's proposed to repair and raise the dry stone wall on the boundary between Lancaster Lane and the properties on River Home View, and tree planting is proposed around the site, including at the western boundary of the site adjacent New Mill Road. And finally, these are the typical elevations. So these are showing plots 6 and 8 at the northern end of the site, and all dwellings are proposed to be split level, being 3 stories to the front and 2 stories to the rear, with additional accommodation in the roof space, and all dwellings are proposed to have an integral garage. The submitted application proposed that the dwellings were to be constructed from manufactured stone under imitation blue slate roofs, but as outlined in the written update, the applicant's agent has raised no objection to the use of natural stone in the walls after officer raised concerns with the manufactured stone. So members have a full and detailed report in front of them. Officers consider the planning history of the site here to form an important consideration for the assessment of the proposal, and section 4 of the report discusses this in some detail. Of note, outline planning permission was granted in 2016 for residential development on the site, and then reserved matters for 9 dwellings at the site was allowed at appeal on the 7th of January 2020. This permission is for 9 dwellings which are detached at the site, but this is yet to be implemented, but it is still extant. In addition to this, the scheme before members is very clear. The scheme before members is very similar to the extant permission at the site. The only differences initially proposed were that the manufactured stone was to be used instead of natural stone, and that the agent wanted the road to not be offered for adoption. However, as outlined in the report, officers had concerns with the use of manufactured stone, and as noted, managed to get an agreement to use natural stone here, and condition 3, which is recommended, has now been altered to be a compliance condition with the stone that was originally agreed under the previous application being used. In relation to the non-adoption of the road, the design and access statement notes that Lancaster Lane is to remain unadopted. It is noted that this is a matter of concern amongst third parties, and the reason why the item was called into committee. Home Valley Parish Council also objected to the application on the grounds of lack of information regarding the adoption of the road. However, as noted, it's not for the local planning authority to condition whether the road is adopted or not. The council can condition that the road is to an adoptable standard with details to follow, and this is what is recommended within condition 14. The council's highways engineer considers such a condition necessary for a number of reasons, such as ensuring the development does not have a negative impact upon the existing public right-of-way. Following the recommended condition by officers, the applicant's agent has outlined that they are content to accept condition 14 as proposed in this instance. So given the similarities between the proposed scheme and the extant permission at the site, and that there have been no significant changes in site circumstances since the approval of this last application, officers consider that the planning history here is a material planning consideration of substantial weight in the assessment of this proposal. The report provides a detailed assessment of the impact of the development upon visual amenity, residential amenity, highway safety, protected species and other considerations, and outlines that officers consider the scheme to be of acceptable design. In this case, 9 representations have been received, 6 of which have raised objection and 3 which have raised general comments, and these are addressed within the report. So in light of the above, it is recommended that the local planning authority inform the planning inspectorate that they would have recommended the application for approval, subject to the conditions set out within the report, had the determination remained within its remit. So I've got nothing further to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No speakers, so members. Councillor Davis, Councillor Homewood, and then Councillor Uppel.
Yeah, it's literally just a question on the issue of adopting the road, not adopting the road. Could you take us through that again in terms of explaining the context of that? Is this issue of the road being adopted or not adopted?
If you're happy for me to, I don't know, it was. Yeah, so the road I think the concerns are here that we're deciding on whether the road is unadopted or not, but that's not for us to decide. That we can't condition that. We can condition that it's to an adoptable standard, and that's what we're doing in this instance. And a highways engineer at Kirklees has raised concerns that if it wasn't to an adoptable standard, then this could have issues such as the maintenance of that. And following on from us recommending a condition in terms of it being to an adoptable standard, the agent here in this instance has raised no objection to that.
Yeah, can you just clarify in terms of the public right of way of Lancaster Lane, the public right of way at the moment, does that mean, and I think in there it refers to it being a footpath, so is it only a footpath or a highway currently?
It's down as a footpath, I believe, but I can check that for you.
The reason I asked it was just because if that becomes a road, what is then the footpath public right of way? Are you just talking about building a pavement?
Well, that's what the condition 14 would be able. We'd be able to achieve further details of that. Yeah.
It was the only reason I asked, because obviously we've had some cases of Prowls that have come to us, and one of them recently said that the Prowl had to maintain its width, couldn't change the width, and I'm just wondering, that looks like quite a wide footpath currently. So how do you maintain a road and a Prowl that meets the current existing requirements?
Yeah, could I refer you to our highways expert here, please?
Through you, Chair. Jamie Turner, Highways Development Management. Yeah, you're right, we've had other applications come in where there's a Prowl. I think that this is why it's important in this instance that we have that stipulation that's brought up to adoptable standard. They'd have to provide a separate, safe route for a pedestrian, whether that be a 2 metre footway or, I don't know, obviously without knowing how wide the Prowl is at the moment, it's hard to say. Yeah, they have to, if the Prowl happens to be 5 metres wide, it'll be down to our Prowl team to say, well, it's separate from the traffic of the vehicles that can use this small offshoot for 9 dwellings. Yes, it's okay. It looks like there's only going to be 4 served off the road and 5 served off the other way around. 5 served off the road and 4 off the shared surface. So the shared surface is probably fine because it's probably going to be 5.5 metres wide anyway. So it's whether it'd be on us as a guest to say this pavement that separates the pedestrians 2 metres wide or however wide it may be is acceptable. That's a safe route from to get to where the road ends now to where the road begins again on New Mill Road. So but yeah, I accept what you're saying about if the Prowl's currently 5 metres wide, are we losing that 3 metres? I think we would have to take a view that we're providing what would be safe alongside any other part of the highway, separating the pedestrians basically rather than it just being a through route. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to come in on there as well, because like I said, what we're considering today is what I suppose what your decision would be should the local authority still have the sort of the power to be deciding the application. Do you want this to be in terms of that the Prowl with the condition relating to that, I suppose, that shared use, to be something flagged up as part of the comments to the inspectorate, and to make sure that it's fully set out in the conditions that go forward as part of the suggested conditions. Thank you, Chair.
I think my point, if it's covered by the conditions that this is a separate thing that will be worked through, I was just conscious that when it said about the Kirklees Prowl team, it says no comments made, which I wasn't sure whether that meant there wasn't any problems or whether they've just not looked at it, if you know what I mean. So I think as long as that's understood, I was just concerned seeing it. It looks like quite a big, wide footpath at the moment, and obviously if that becomes a road, that has surely a specific impact on the Prowl. It may be that that's fine and that it can be accommodated, or the road itself is considered as part of the Prowl or whatever. I don't know the answer to that. As long as the conditions are there to work through it, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I agree with the points that James made there. I think that's really important. I mean, the road has to be adopted. I know you're limited in what you can do here, and you've got the condition 14 in, which is good. But it would be a shame if the road wasn't adopted. So I hope that's what's going to happen. I was just going to ask you about housing mix, because it's 9 homes detached. They're all 4-bed. I know there's a SPD coming on affordable and housing mix. It's just, for me, it's a bit of a shame that this is just one type of house and they're all 4-bed. I'm a bit concerned with that, to be honest.
The problem is, of course, it's got outline planning, isn't it? And that's where our hands are tied. I know the site very, very well. I don't know how they've got away with it, but that's an aside.
Chair, just for clarification, if the members here today decide to refuse this application against the officer recommendation to approve, and then it still go to the appeal planning inspectorate who make that decision, yeah, if the planning inspector approve this application, do the council lose any or have to pay the cost or whatever?
Thank you, Chair. So, like I said, the application is going to be decided by the inspectorate, whichever the outcome today. So what we need to do is, like I say, to set out what your decision would have been if we still had the power to determine. The officer recommendation is to approve the application. That's what we're recommending you put forward to the inspectorate. If members decided to refuse the application, you would need to ensure that you had those sound reasons to refuse the application, because as you know, once you're in that appeal stage, which this is definitely going to go to, because we've got the non-determination, there is the risk of the costs. So the applicant could put in an award of costs against the local authority if there isn't a sound reason to refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, could I just ask about the reference to part of the site being flood zone 2 and what that means in real terms of this part of the site flooding?
Well, what we'll do, we'll take Councillor Bellamy, she's asking a question, I believe, and then we'll let the officers come back again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's back to the road bit, to be honest. I know you've said it'll be brought up to a standard, but not adopted. So I'm curious to know that once it is brought up to a standard, who is actually then responsible for keeping it up to that standard? Because obviously it won't be the council because they haven't adopted it.
Right. Yeah, could I refer that again to James? Yeah, thanks. I'll go back to the point on there was the question on the flood zone. So the flood zone is flood zone 2, and that's at the access from Riverhome View to Lancaster Lane. So it's only quite a marginal part of the site. So that's medium probability of flooding, and the report goes into that sort of the probability there. And there's not much development on that element of the site. There's no housing proposed on there.
Through you, Chair, in terms of the highways question for adoptability, it's made up to an adoptable standard as it would be if we were to adopt it, but we can't do anything. There's nothing else to say, right, you're giving us that road. So there's two options. It would either be a private maintenance company that the developer set up in perpetuity, or it would be the same as our older unadopted roads, where each site frontage would be responsible for the upkeep of their section of that part of the road. So it may, as you know, with it's a source of frustration to me when they're not put up for adoption, because you know that it looks shiny and bright for 10 years and then it's often the council has to go and say, you have to make this back up, and it could be at the cost of hundreds of pounds to the occupant, but they know that when they purchase the property, because it is an unadopted road. But that's the answer, thanks.
So Deborah, you can come in.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. On the business about the vector, see it pointing in
Deborah, sorry to interrupt, Deborah. You're breaking up. I don't know if you can get a little bit closer to your phone, possibly, or I think it's your connection.
Right on it.
Yes, yeah.
I'll be brief. The extant planning permission is a very weighty material consideration, and if the members were to decide to go against that, then I think there is a likelihood of a costs appeal, in addition to which members would have to set out their reasons for refusal at this meeting, and in officers' opinion there aren't any which will stand up to scrutiny. But the positive side is that members can express. Am I not being heard?
Yes, you're fine, Deborah, yeah.
Members can express how they would like to direct the inspector in respect of the maintenance of the road, perhaps suggesting that there is a residence management company, and also alert the inspector to your concerns about the Prowl. Thank you.
Did Councillor Munro, did you wish to speak?
Sorry, I'm just a bit confused about Lancaster Lane. What's the width of it? Could you actually fit a single carriageway in either direction along it?
Through you, Chair. I assume so. Yes, look at the plan. I've not actually visited the site personally, but it's 5.5 metres wide. That is it. 5.5 metres wide. The adopted section. So they must feel that they can do it. I mean, it's all scrub on now. The actual Lancaster Lane, what's described as Lancaster Lane, that public right of way, as shown in the photographs, is probably relatively narrow at the moment. It isn't 5.5 metres wide, but it's the same as if it was an empty field at the moment. Then they can come in and construct a road to adoptable standards, although not to be adopted. That is 5.5 metres wide. That's subject less than 1 in 10 gradient. It'll just be to an adoptable standard, and if the developer have demonstrated they can do that in the plans that they submitted.
But then you've got the Prowl as well. It's as already been mentioned.
You've got the necessity to get pedestrians safely from A to B still, yes.
I didn't quite catch what you said earlier, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, looking at the plans, I suspect in this instance what they've done is thought there's going to be 9 houses, and 5 of them are this element of adoptable, to be up to adoptable standard. There's not going to be a great number of vehicles using that road, so it's going to be, if there are 9 vehicles and they each come out, there might be 5 in a peak hour. So yeah, there's going to be an increase of vehicles on that public right of way. And I suppose it's whether you judge that acceptable or not. We'd say that it's going to be slow moving traffic. The number of pedestrians may be low. It is going to increase vehicle movements in that area, but as to what degree and whether that's significant enough for us to raise an objection to it. In this instance, we haven't felt that it is.
Paths.
Bear with me. It runs from.
Seem to be going round in circles here. Councillor Davis, have you got something further to say?
I sort of hopefully to try and bring this to a conclusion. I would certainly propose that we support the officer's recommendation, but based on what Deborah had said, that we have those conditions in there around the concerns around the road itself, the management company, and ensuring that the Prowl issues are absolutely crystal clear, transparent, and there's nothing afterwards. So on that basis, I'd be happy to propose.
Because that will mean then that the council doesn't have to pick up the bill for this.
Yeah.
Councillor Upwell, this is the final one.
Yeah. I mean, I mainly agree with what Paul said here.
Yes.
I just wanted to get a response to the housing mix question that I asked before, because it's all detached and they're all 4-bedroom. So
yeah, it's unfortunate, and I do touch upon that in the report, but in this case there's not that policy requirement there, and in this instance, as noted, there's an extant permission on the site for something which is exactly the same in essentially, so it would be very difficult to request that as well.
I feel as though this is a decision we have to make with our hands tied. So has it been moved? You moved. Is that seconded, Councillor Stockall? Okay, you can go round, please.
Can I just, before we go to vote, can I just get an officer just to just clarify and summarise what we're voting on here, please? Because I got down the condition, as per the officer recommendation, but subject to the issues around roads and the management of the roads, and there was something else, and if someone could just confirm that,
Through you, Chair. So, yes, as per officer recommendation, along with the details of the management company for the highway, the roads, and then in terms of the public right-of-way, a condition relating to how that would be the details of that separated out from the road, and to flag that up as a concern raised by members as part of this discussion. Thank you, Chair.
So, that was Councillor Homewood and, it was Councillor Davis, wasn't it, who moved it? Councillor Coe, so you're happy with that basis, yeah? Okay, so we'll go for the vote then. So, Councillor McGuinn? For. Councillor Bellamy?
Against.
Councillor Bamford? Abstain. Councillor Armour?
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Richards?
Abstain.
Councillor Munro?
Abstain.
Councillor Allah? For. Councillor Sawa?
For.
Councillor Uppel?
For.
Councillor Sokol?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
And Councillor Homewood?
For.
And Councillor Lyons?
Against.
Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for, 2 against, 4 abstentions, so the application has been approved.
Right, we move on then to page 93, New Lathe Lane, Holmfirth.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Ellie Worth and I'm the case officer for this application. The applicant is seeking permission for the erection of an extension to an existing dwelling within the Greenbelt. The application has been brought to Huddersfield Subcommittee at the request of Councillor Thirst, who does not believe that the garage should be read with the main dwelling and that the development would not have an impact upon the surroundings. Here is the location plan for the site, and as you can see, the area in red is the development proposed. This slide shows the existing floor plans and elevations. So in terms of what is original, this includes the lounge area and then the dining kitchen, study bedroom, master bedroom and single bedroom and lobby. So it's the utility room and the detached garage, which I'll touch on later, which are later additions. This slide shows the extension, so as you can see it would create a guest bedroom and would have a width of 7 metres by 6.9 metres. Here are some photos from within the site. There is a significant change in topography resulting in the development being seen within the wider landscape. This is specifically shown on the bottom right hand side photo. This photo at the top left shows the view to the east looking back towards the main house. As you can see, behind the caravan is the existing double garage, which I'll touch on later, and the main house. This bottom photo looks back towards where the extension will be, so it will sit in this corner highlighted on the screen. This photo has been taken just to demonstrate the prominence of the extension within the wider landscape. As mentioned, it will be situated around here. This slide shows the proposed site plan, so as you can see, as before, the extension is in red, so the detached garage is what I was talking about earlier, and it can also be seen on this screenshot taken from Google Maps. This is just to give members an idea of the extent of the garage that's already there. As such, officers consider the extension to result in a disproportionate addition equating to a volume increase of 78% within the green belt, over and above what is considered original. For this reason, the proposal, in line with both local and national planning policy, would result in inappropriate development within the green belt. In this instance, no very special circumstances have been provided to outweigh the harm caused. From a visual perspective, concern is also raised in terms of the extension subservience. However, it is important to know that officers' overarching concern is the impact within the green belt. It is also considered that the proposed fenestration bears no resemblance to the existing openings. However, the extension would be constructed from matching materials. In terms of residential amenity, no objections are raised from officers as there is sufficient space between the neighbouring dwellings. There would also be sufficient space on site in the formation of existing hard standing, and therefore no highway concerns are also raised. No representations have been received throughout the course of this application. However, officers would like to emphasise the impact in which the development would have on the green belt and therefore are recommending refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The first.
It appears that I seem to be the only one that's here today. Yeah, well, I did agree to this, basically because it was put by planning officers that it was an extension of what it already had extensions, including the double garage, which is not, when it isn't connected to the property, is not classed an extension. It's only a very small extension. It's going to save probably somebody putting in a plan for a house, a separate house in the area, which will be coupled again onto a sewage system. So I much prefer to see a little bit of extended properties, which is when families grow up, of course, you need to extend a little bit, and if they can afford to extend, then there isn't a problem. Yes, it's in the green belt, but he's asked his neighbours are happy with it, and it's not going to stand out. In fact, it won't be noticed, but I'll leave it with the planning committee. If they think that it's wrong, then fine, but I'll remember that when other things come up as well. Don't worry about that. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present my case against the refusal based on cumulative excessive extensions to the dwelling. We fully accept the officer's calculations, but they include double detached garage, which, after expert advice, we feel should be excluded for the following reasons. It's sited in an internal corner formed by the two access roads which serve the site. It's a considerable distance from the dwelling and separated by a driveway entrance and internal vehicular turning area. Additionally, it was a completely separate submission for a neat, secure vehicle parking facility and approved as such. Finally, from a planning aspect, it sits in front of the principal elevation of the bungalow, adjacent to the main site access road. So due to the above, its position and site levels, we genuinely feel it could not be seriously considered as a possible extension to the bungalow. We would respectfully suggest the garage should be considered a completely independent, separate outbuilding in its own right, as described by officers in their assessment email dated the 13th of August. As such, it should not be taken into account when assessing the extension or alteration of the building and what represents disproportionate additions over and above the size of the existing building. This is set out in paragraph 149C of the National Planning Policy Framework. If you feel able to support this viewpoint and exclude the garage, the proposed guest bedroom plus the previously approved utility would meet the Council's approximate 35% extension guidelines, as the garage is larger in volume than the application proposal, as the assessment email calculations indicate. The detached garage is 34% plus the utility of 5%, which is a total of 39%. The proposed extension is 32% plus the utility of 5%, which is a total of 37%. One final point raised by officers, paragraphs 10-15, refers to our preferred design choice for the gable windows. Should committee accept the overall principle of development, we will be pleased to discuss acceptable alternative details with officers. Our existing dwelling, approved by your council, was for the conversion of a small redundant farm building and only has the benefit of a double bedroom, a single bedroom and a box room. Whilst originally adequate for our living purposes, the proposed scheme would now provide better facilities and allow accommodation for visitors as circumstances required. It's a basic double bedroom with ensuite facilities and in our view would be the final extension to the property we envisage to fulfil our present and future needs. I respectfully request your support and thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Members. Silence is golden.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just looking through the application. Yeah, I think there is no objection from any objection against this annexed application. I think there are no comments or no objection even from the highways. So, I don't know. I think I'll leave it to other member. I think I'm actually in favor to approve the application.
Councillor Homewood, and then Councillor Day.
Yeah, just obviously you can see in the papers that the double garage application was from 2002. I think that's correct. So do we have information from that period? Can we confirm that that was considered an extension to the existing dwelling? Because I think if it was, that tells us that we need to apply look at that as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, once again, I'll take Councillor Davies, and if there are any further questions, then we'll let the officers come back, unless that was the same question. Right, are there any further questions or answers? Or no? Right, the officer come in then.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the 2002 application for the garage, I've just got the application form up in front of me at this moment in time, and it was a householder planning application form. So the only time you can submit a householder planning application form is when it's within the curtilage of the property. So taking that into account, like say we consider that the garage is within the curtilage, then the next step from that, then coming back to our local plan now, what we've got set out in there is like the preamble to the policy itself, and what it sets out is, let me just find the bit, assessment will also include consideration of the presence of outbuildings and other curtilage buildings where the cumulative effect of those buildings, the proposed extension and any previous extensions would render the host building subservient in appearance. So as officers, what we're saying is it is within the curtilage in terms of the garage, and it needs to be taken into account when making your calculation for cumulative impact. So that's how officers have reached their recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I want a proposition. Councillor Homewood.
Yeah, I mean, being based on that, I understand the points that have been made by the applicants, and I understand, I'm sympathetic to that, but I think we need to follow the policies set out and be consistent, so I'm happy to move the officer recommendation on this one, to refuse. Thank you.
Councillor Bellamy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be perfectly happy with this, providing that it's done in stone and fits in with the main building. So I'm, to be honest, I'll move that we accept it.
I think it's already been moved refusal. You can vote against if that's going to be the case. Seconded. Right, Councillor Davis, you wish to speak.
Yeah, just following from Councillor Homewood, I think we certainly have to follow the policy. If we start deviating, then this is going to give us issues, certainly going forward. And I think certainly protecting the green belts, something that we've focused on many times. So I would second the proposal.
Councillor Bell, you'll be able to vote against it, and if it falls, then we go the other way.
It has. So yes, it's been moved by Councillor Homewood, seconded by Councillor Davis to refuse as per officer recommendation. Councillor Gwynn?
Against.
Councillor Bellamy?
Against.
Councillor Bamford?
Against.
Councillor Armour?
Against.
Councillor Lee Richards?
Support the officers.
To refuse?
Yeah, to refuse.
Okay. Councillor Munro?
I support the officers' recommendation to refuse to.
Yeah. Councillor Oller?
I support the officers.
Yep. Councillor Sawa? Councillor Apple?
For.
Councillor Sokol?
Against.
Councillor Davis? For. Councillor Homewood?
For.
Councillor Lyons? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against. So officer recommendations to refuse has been approved.
Right, we move on then to page 103, which is Stocks Walk, Almonbury.
Sorry, Chair, it's just taking a while for it to load. Apologies for the delay there. So this application, I'm Neil Beckwood, I'm presenting this application. It seeks outline consent for the erection of assisted supported living accommodation at land opposite former garages on Stocks Walk in Almonbury. The application seeks to agree the principle of developing the site, the scale, layout, appearance and access, with landscaping being reserved. The application is brought to committee at the request of Councillor McGuinn as set out in the committee report. The site is formerly occupied by some dilapidated timber and prefabricated residential garages that were on the site. However, these have now been removed and the site is cleared. The site can be seen on the slide outlined in red. There are a number of buildings opposite. To the north is a former old clergy house with 3 residential dwellings that also forms grade 2 listed building. There's some residential flats to the eastern side, and then a former Sunday school which is a community centre to the south. There are a number of protected protected trees around the site due to the site's location within the conservation area. So this is what the site looks like at the moment. The grade 2 listed building in the background. As you can see, a number of mature trees located in the local area. This is another view of the site looking back to the old clergy house, the flats there on the right hand side, and this is a view back up to the north, I believe, showing some of the trees that are adjacent to the site. The street tree here, which is one of the particular ones of concern. This is what the site used to look like before clearance works took place. You can see the former garages there visible, and then that's a view up showing the trees, this time in leaf, with the Sunday school, which is now a community centre, opposite. The proposed point of access, which you'll see on the plans later, is approximately where that opening is, and then there'll be some further walls removed. As can be seen there, that would be the building located occupying most of the site, with 3 parking spaces adjacent to Stocks Walk. That would be the appearance of the property, be constructed from natural stone, 2-storey, and then there's some visuals with some colour, a single-storey element to the one side closer to the flat, and a projecting single-storey element, and then a 2-storey section there as well. So members have a full and detailed report in front of them, and officers consider the principle of developing the site to be acceptable, along with the proposal's design, its impacts on the adjacent heritage designations, the listed building and conservation area, and the provision of the 3 spaces for the proposed 3 one-bedroom flats is also considered to be an acceptable arrangement. The main issue with the scheme is its impact on the adjacent protected trees outside of the site, and the tree officers assessed this proposal in detail as set out in the report, and the applicant has submitted an impact assessment which has also been considered. There are concerns that the proposed building would require, which is located close to one of the protected trees, would require significant pruning to accommodate the building, which would disfigure the tree and threaten the public amenity of the tree. Furthermore, due to the proximity of the building to the tree, there would be an ongoing conflict between the tree and the building that would significantly increase the pressure to fell the tree, and therefore the proposal would be contrary to policy RP33, which seeks to protect trees. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. Nick Gallard, the tree officer, is here, who can go into more detail if members would like about the issue to do with the tree. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir. Paul Iverson. Yeah.
Afternoon, Chair and members. The application was submitted in January this year, and over the past 11 months we've worked proactively with the Council to provide a scheme that would be acceptable. We listened to the objections raised by the public and actively carried out significant amendments to the proposals to reduce the overall scale and massing of the building. This included reducing the number of flats from 4 to 3, lowering ridge and eaves heights and reducing the overall footprint. Following this, we ensured the building would not over-dominate the listed building to the north and cause little impact on the property to the east. Following the parking proposals have been approved by Highways, the design has been approved by Conservation Heritage. We have addressed the objectors' concerns. The drainage is not an issue and is something which can be overcome with good design. The tree officer requested an arboricultural impact assessment which we provided, and following this we amended the design again to minimise excavations for foundations by retaining existing ground levels to the west of the site, which prevent any impact on the roots of the neighbouring trees. It was also recommended that one tree should have minor pruning and crown lift, but would not be adversely affected. The tree officer objected to this, and his main issue was potential nuisance shading caused by the tree, which could lead to pressure for the tree to be pruned again in the future. We believe this reasoning to be unjustified, given that we are assuming that the pruning will be required, and see no reason why this could not simply be addressed by a planning condition restricting any further pruning without written consent. Following this planning request, we amend the design further by removing the front section of the building to square it off. However, this would result in a narrower building and a loss of another flat, therefore making the project completely unviable. Hence, we could not agree to this amendment, which led to this refusal. On this basis, we do not feel the reason for refusal is reasonable or justified. Thank you.
Thank you. Members. Councillor McGuinn.
Yeah, I mentioned quite a few times in this, as I said at the beginning, I was involved in the pre-application, so I was first approached by residents who were unhappy about the development on the doorstep, and I did talk to the planning office about it, and initially it was supposed to be a 4-bedroom development. We negotiated it down to 3 and moved it away from the housing. We also had representations from the Wesley Centre, which is just across the way, and they were really concerned about parking in the area, but there was sufficient, in the planning officer's opinion, there was sufficient car parking spaces. So I was backwards and forwards with the residents, with the planner, talking about how we can mitigate for them, and I thought we'd reach an agreement and that could be taken forward. But then I heard about at the last minute, I heard about the tree officer coming in, and what I want to consider here is I'm not doubting what they're saying. I'm asking members to consider whether it's a reasonable request through putting a planning condition that the tree that you would be able to prune the tree, or you would have to ask permission to do it, and whether that would. If they're not allowed, then the whole planning is unviable, because they would have to reduce the number of bedrooms to 2 instead of 3. So they negotiated down from 4 to 3, and now they're wanting to negotiate down to 2, and that was unviable for the developer. It's not that I'm for or against it. I was just interested in whether we could put a planning condition, whether they could have a planning condition here that if the tree needed pruning, then they would have to ask for planning permission. And it's as simple as that. I'm really asking for opinions of fair-minded people to see what they think.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My default position is that I love trees and don't like to see them destroyed, so that's my starting point. However, in this case, we do have a need for this type of accommodation. We have an ageing population, we have quite a high incidence of disabled people within the general population. There's a balancing act to be done. We've got this need for this type of accommodation, which I think is quite desperate at times. We really do need this type of accommodation. Yes, there's a big value to be put to trees, but let's look at the balancing, because this council sends mixed messages about trees. It's happy to chop them down by the dozen to widen the road. Who are we to say that we don't want to allow the pruning of one tree to prevent the accommodation being provided for disabled people who need this type of accommodation? So on that balancing act, I'm in favour of allowing the building to go ahead, which would, I think, be contrary to the recommendation. Yes, would be contrary to the recommendation. But I do think we need this accommodation. Thank you.
Councillor Sokol.
Yeah, I agree with the Councillor Bill Armour. Yeah, we are going through the very difficult time since last 2 years now. COVID-19 situation, more and more people are in isolation, or they need some special support from other people. Yeah, and to get that special support, we need some special the house supporting, assisted supporting houses. Yeah, I think we are encouraging people or developer to come to have these assisted supporting, because people need it. So it's a time we need it. It's only one tree. We need to cut back those branches 2 meters. They say we can't build the houses. It's not. I don't think it's right. We have some benefit of assisted accommodation, so I think I'm in favour to approve this application, Mr. Chair. It's up to the members.
Are you moving that, Councillor Sokol? Are you moving that?
Yeah, I'm moving.
Thank you. I'd just like to say this site is in the historic part of Almonbury, and it's a conservation area, and the trees, one of them, form an avenue of trees along Cemetery Walk, and I feel that if that tree is affected, it will cause a gap in that avenue of trees along Cemetery Walk, and I think that needs to be taken into account. It is one tree, but if it does decay and die because of this building, you have to also remember the setting and the location of this building that's going to go there. So I just wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Councillor Davis and then Councillor Homewood.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to hear the tree officer take us through his assessment. I know we have some of the information about it being very useful. I think if we went through that, because certainly from my perspective, I'd like to understand a little bit more. My natural inclination is absolutely to support where we have an issue with mature trees, but I'd like to understand the thought process behind this before coming to any conclusion.
Councillor Homewood first.
Yeah, I mean, similar, I think that would be helpful. My just comments on what had been mentioned about the trees would be that, yes, obviously sometimes when there's large developments or whatever, trees are lost. I would think in those circumstances though, there'd be a requirement to provide replacement and to balance that. I don't know that that's going to be the case here, and the cost of the implications of doing that for the applicant. And the second thing that I wanted to raise is that I think, we also need to presumably think about the amenity of the people who'll be living in that property. I just don't think you would ever build something that close to trees and you could see how overshadowed it was from those trees. So I think my question would be, even if you allowed this and there was just some gentle pruning was done, how would that sit with the amenity of the people living in there who would just be living in shade? So I think that's something we need to consider too. Cheers.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. Can I come in at some point?
Hello, yes, sorry, I'm Nick Goddard, the tree officer, so I've provided the comments.
Yes, if you could give us an overall picture, please.
Yeah, so the assessment made basically by the applicant's tree report is just that the building doesn't fit without reducing back away to allow it to be constructed. So that they're reducing back the canopy by a couple of metres and removing a couple of metres of lower branches to essentially create a space for the building. The British standard, which is for trees and construction, which is what we should be judging it by, is talks about shade and how that is a constraint of development, and you should consider the shade and nuisance issues of that. So where you have to fit the building into the actual tree canopy, you're not only creating, it's not just about the pruning of the tree, it is about the then repeated effect of that on the tree, and the effect of the shade, the sort of dark days during the summer when you can see it's daylight but you can't see much of the sun at all, and then the nuisance issue of all the leaves and small branches and twigs, everything that falls off, creating a maintenance issue if nothing else, as much as a nuisance. So those are the reasons that I looked at it and judged that the constant repeated pruning of that and then the pressure on that as it builds into more of a maintenance issue, I could see that being a threat to the tree in the longer term.
Right, Deborah, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I can see that members are, well, divided, but there is a body within members who think that the advantages of having accommodation of this type outweigh in the planning balance the effect upon the tree, and to safeguard that decision and to accord the correct weight, I think it would be necessary to enter section 106 requiring that the use remains as intended, in that it's supported living rather than unrestricted residential property, to safeguard the decision of the type of accommodation over the tree with all its attendant problems.
Right, thank you. So, yes.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? About the parking, is the parking for the residents, or will it be for staff coming to support the people who are living in the properties? So are the 3 parking spaces sufficient both for the residents and the people who will be visiting? It is quite a narrow road. I have walked along Cemetery Road. It is quite narrow, obstructed. A lot of residential properties there, as I understand.
We're getting as many officers as our members.
Thank you, Chair. With this proposed accommodation, which is assisted supported living, there are 3 one-bedroom units, and then there's a caretaker's room as well associated with it. So there's 3 spaces which is considered to be sufficient to meet that demand. So it might be that one is for the caretaker and then others for visitors, or it might be that one resident has a car, but we feel that the 3 spaces overall is sufficient for the development that's proposed.
Thank you.
I believe it was moved, but it wasn't seconded. Bill, did you move? You moved?
I'll move that we refuse the application as it's with. We've got a double negative here. I want to move it to the effect that we allow the building to go ahead.
Yes. So against the officer's recommendation.
Yes, I think Councillor Sockle, you've moved approval effectively, and you're seconding that then, are you, Councillor Armour?
Oh, Councillor Sockle moved it.
Yes.
Yes. You're seconding.
But as long as it gets built, I'm happy.
Well, but the reasons given were with regard to all provision for older people, wasn't it? You know, to support older people that was it infirm? I don't know. Or age.
In this way, that the planning balance is in favour of this type of accommodation because of the need for this type of supported accommodation outweighs the consideration of the protected tree. And do we want to go further to secure that with a 106? I would suggest.
So, Councillor Sockle, Councillor Armour, are you comfortable with that as a proposal?
Yes, Mr. Can we have a condition for some sort of off-site contribution to new trees? Would that be permissible? No. That's fine, forget I said that. I'd be happy to see a new tree planted.
I think the amount of money that would cost to do that would be negligible.
Okay, in that case, I'm happy to go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, can I be clear? Are we securing the approval on the basis that the type of accommodation will be retained by way of a section 106, and that being the material planning consideration that outweighs the loss of the tree, so to speak?
That's right, but that's if it carry, because I mean it would still be against officer's recommendation, and we haven't taken the vote yet. So if we can probably, it needs some tidying and probably done if it goes that way.
Yeah, so just to confirm, at the moment I've got Councillor Sockle approving, seconded by Councillor Armour. That's approved as opposite to the approved accommodation, the development, subject to that additional section 106 agreement to retain the accommodation type. That was my understanding that you were happy with. Is that all right with you, Deborah, in terms of the proposal?
Yes, thank you.
Did you want to say something, Councillor McGinn, that might be useful?
Yeah, I just thought I want to make clear we're not getting. I don't want to see the tree removed. I just we want to be able to manage the tree, prune it. I have no wish to get rid of any trees on that avenue. I agree with Councillor Munro. It's a beautiful area, wonderful avenue of trees. I just think that the consideration for the accommodation, to have this accommodation in this area, outweighs. Well, if we can prune the tree, I think that, and not get rid of it, that's what I want.
Keeping it pruned to whatever standard.
Make it a condition that they have to apply for planning permission to prune the tree.
Right, Councillor Davis, this is the last.
The very last comment. I think it's fair to assume, and in my mind, that at some point, if we allow this to go ahead, that tree will go. I think it's unrealistic for us to imagine that tree is going to survive X number of years. So I think if we vote on this, let's be honest and open about that. The tree will go at some point.
Right, so we'll go to the vote. Do you want to make a comment, Julia, in relation to the pruning of the tree, please?
Through who, Chair. In terms of the pruning of the tree or removal of the tree, that would need separate consent. So it's not actually planning permission. That would be that. So it can't be conditioned as part of a planning permission because the tree's in the conservation area. There's a separate process to go through in relation to that. But just to, I suppose, stress what our tree officer is saying, that the pruning which is likely to come forward as a result of this development is highly likely to result in the loss of that tree. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Munro, finally.
I just wanted to underline the fact that it is for assisted supported living, so not necessarily for anyone who's old, but actually it could be for anybody with perhaps a disablement. I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that. Thank you.
Okay, right, so we'll go into the vote now. So this is contrary to the officer's recommendation. So it's to approve development with the additional section 106 agreement to retain the accommodation type. So Councillor McGuinn?
For.
Councillor Bellamy?
For.
Councillor Bamford?
For.
Councillor Armour?
For.
Councillor Lee Richards?
I wish to support the officer's recommendation.
So says no. Yeah, okay. Councillor Munro?
I wish to support the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Oller?
For.
Councillor Sarwar?
For.
Councillor Uppel?
Against.
Councillor Sokol?
For.
Councillor Davis?
Against.
Councillor Homewood?
Against.
Councillor Lyons?
For.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against. So the application has been approved subject to that additional section 106 agreement.
Right, page 121, which is the Granny Annex, Kismet, Dover Lane, Holmfirth.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks the erection of a first floor extension and alterations to an existing granny annex at Dover Lane in Home Firth. The application is brought to committee today at the request of Councillor Firth, as set out in the published committee report. The application site is located within the green belt, and the host property is a detached stone bungalow with annex located east off Dover Lane in Home Firth. The property benefits from a large curtilage with amenity space to the north, east and south, with a detached single and double garage to the north with a driveway. So that's the site. The curtilage is outlined in blue on that plan, specifically where the annex is outlined in red. That's the aerial, and then there's the plan there. So this is the property in question. This is the main dwelling, a bungalow, construction of stone, and this is the annex to the side on the northern side, but it's turned gable set back from the main bungalow. It's another angle looking at the annex. There's one of the garages that I described earlier. So the top drawing is the current situation, below is the proposed. So the application proposes to erect a first floor extension above the existing annex in its entirety, and also a two-storey side extension that can just be seen there with a new entrance door. It will be constructed from random Yorkshire stone to match the existing and a slate grey roof. That's the rear elevation, just showing again the extra floor built straight above the existing and its relationship with the existing bungalow, which is the main dwelling on site. So in terms of assessment, the proposal, members of a full and detailed report in front of them. However, in summary, the key considerations of this scheme is its impact on the greenbelt and also the design of the extension. With regard to the greenbelt itself, the existing annex represents an extension to the host property approved in 2008, and a further addition of the first floor would equate to additions at the site being over 50% in terms of volume, or 57% in terms of footprint. Such a scale of addition is considered to, and its first floor nature is considered to lead to the proposal representing a disproportionate addition to the host property, which is originally the bungalow, and would form an inappropriate development within the greenbelt. Inappropriate development in the greenbelt should not be approved except in very special circumstances. While some have been put forward by the applicant, these mainly relate to personal circumstances where officers can only give limited weight to these. It is therefore considered the harm to the greenbelt is not been outweighed by the circumstances put forward, and the application will be contrary to policy 13 of the chapter 13 of the MPPF and policy 57 of the local plan. Furthermore, in relation to the design, the proposal is for the additional floor on top of the annex, which would lead to the annex being significantly taller than the main bungalow, is considered to not represent a subservient addition to the host property and would form an unsympathetic and incongruous and overly prominent addition to the host property, contrary to RP24, the local plan, and policies in the SPD, chapter 12 of the MPPF, and also policies in the Home Valley neighbourhood plan. For these reasons, the application is recommended for refusal. Nothing further to add, Chair.
Chair, we've got Councillor Firth.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much. This is at the end of Dover Lane. It's an extended family. The granny flat has been extended for the gentleman's son and daughter-in-law as a part of the setup. Rather than build a separate house, a new house, they decided this was a good way to do it. I can't fault it because the guy himself is a builder, is a local builder, so it's been built with taste. And it's right at the bottom of Dover Lane. Is that the neighbours don't mind? There's nothing spoiling the greenbelt outlook or attitude of the greenbelt. As far as I can see, there's no problem. But obviously we've been finding problems here all morning, haven't we? You know, I suppose we'll have to go along with what everybody else says. And I would ask this question. All those plans up to press, apart from one, I visited them all. How many of the planning committee have visited any of these plans that's been put forward this morning? I would like to know that. Thank you. And as I said, I'm for it, not against it. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, Chair, I must apologise to the committee for this hastily prepared application response. I had requested it to be deferred to your February meeting due to holidays, but was only notified Monday this had been turned down. As the agent's and applicant's father, I decided his future was more important, so I've cancelled the trip to be here in person and present our case. A brief background for members. The annex is a simple one-bed unit, originally built to accommodate my wife's frail mother. As such, a planning condition stating it to be ancillary to the main dwelling was no problem. Our feelings were, on her passing, it would allow my son some personal space and allow him to save up for a house of his own. COVID has delayed his marriage, but he, his future wife and daughter essentially need their own private accommodation, hence this application. Now, from a planning aspect, the parent bungalow was completed in 1982 and I presume is what officers consider the original building in their calculations. However, they also, in the report, refer to previous historical buildings on the site in 1907 and 1893. These appear to have been much larger and would suggest that the relative impact of our proposal would then be even less. Committee will be aware that under prior approval, PD rights allow an additional storey onto the original building, bungalow footprint, even in Greenbelt, as is this case. Though policy suggests otherwise, after a career in building design, I am at odds that an extension could be built that's some 60% larger than that considered disproportionate and incongruous. This scenario massively influenced the application design process. Due to time factors, I have used officers' calculations as a fair comparison, but based purely on footprint, identical storey heights and roof pitch, it would allow an extension that's 60 square metres and 143 cubic metres approximately larger than that before you today. In our minds, this doesn't really equate. Although permissible, we are convinced it would be a greater intrusion on the street scene and Greenbelt than that before you. It could easily create an unusual 6/7-bed unit, but the accommodation is not, sadly, where appropriate, to provide my son's family with private accommodation. Additionally, though, time is limited, I quickly refer to paragraph 5.1, which mentions boundary colouring. We had no objections with amending the site plan officers had requested. On the second point, COVID has limited negotiations to phone and email, which cannot replace face-to-face meetings. There was lengthy discussions at home on officers' suggestion of further ground floor extensions. Due to the elongated plot shape, this extended the footprint.
Your time's up.
Sorry.
Thank you. Members.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at this and there doesn't seem to be any neighbour objections or not really any objections apart from the fact that it is obviously in the green belt. To be honest, looking at the pictures, I can't actually see anything wrong with it apart from, like I said, it's green belt, but it doesn't really affect anybody else. So, to be honest, I'm happy to move for approval with the condition that the extension is in keeping with natural stone.
Any? Councillor Holm.
I know it's probably detailed in the report and I'm just not understanding it, so apologies for asking you to.
If there's going to be questions, well, we'll wait till we get any other questions and then let the officer come back.
That's fine. All it was is just to understand that obviously the applicant just referred to then as well the previous, so the 1893 and 1907, and I think what you're saying in that is that was the original development, so that's on the basis of the size of the footprint. So just because when you're just looking at it on these images, maybe it's not representative, but obviously those plans do look like the original property was bigger than the current one. I don't know if I'm seeing that correctly or not. And I also just wanted to check in terms of the footprint. Does that include stories? Because I don't know how you would know whether these properties were two-storey or bungalows, or I don't know if there's any clarification you can provide on that.
what are we all waiting for now? Or is nobody wishing to speak? You want it on the back of that, right? I'll supersede what I'd said previously. Then we'll let the officer come back immediately.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in the officer report, they've looked back at historic maps from 1893 and 1907, and as I understand things, there was a building there historically which had a reasonably large footprint, and then as the applicant has described, at some point between then and now the building was demolished and re-erected. I think it was 1982. So I think we've acknowledged that there's been a building on there for a number of years, but the calculations I think they've utilised the existing footprint from the historic maps to show sort of relatively a generous approach to it, and then calculated that based on what's there now. So we still feel that the addition is more than what we'd normally allow, hence why we recommended it for refusal.
So with that in mind, yes.
So, just going back, when you said if it's constructed after 1948 as it was built originally, so this building, so what relevance do these historic? You're not using them as the footprint from which we start this from. That's why I'm getting confused. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, in terms of the 1948, that's when the Planning Act came in. So that's when, like any built farm or anything like that, that's when it's sort of taken from. So I think what the officer was trying to sort of demonstrate here is that yes, we're acknowledging that there were larger structures on site, but that was pre-1948 before the Planning Act. So just to demonstrate there has been something there in the past. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ruppel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, the resident said that he wanted the opportunity for further negotiation, and he felt he wasn't given that opportunity for whatever reason. Is that an option, that you could go back and speak to him about what can be done and what can't be done with the property? It seems a shame to refuse it if there are other options that you could potentially negotiate with the resident.
To say, I mean, Councillor Holmwood and Councillor Davies. Yeah, I'd like to keep taking one and then an officer, then one and then an officer. It's going on long enough.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I misheard what the resident was saying. I think what he was saying, what I took from what he was saying, is that he wanted the decision deferred because he couldn't originally get to the meeting, not that he wanted to discuss it further, and he's had to make arrangements to be here. And I'm guessing that we've done that because we need to make a determination, otherwise we'd be outside of timescale. So that's what I thought. I mean, based on what you suggested, I think, again, it's very similar to the other one. I think we need to follow the guidance, and actually when I look at the plans, and I don't think the explanation of what it's needed for helps, to be honest, in my view, because to me it looks like we're trying to create essentially a semi-detached property, which the new bit of it being kind of larger than the original, bigger than the original element, or at least taller. So I just struggle to see on that basis why we would diverge from the officer's recommendation to refuse. So I'm happy to move that we refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
We haven't had either seconded. Yours haven't been seconded, and neither was Councillor Bellamy's seconded. Now, Councillor
sorry, am I next? Or did you call? Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, this one, but it's extremely large. Clearly, I don't think there's any further room for negotiation, so there's no point actually putting a deferral in there, the footprint, because I think that option went down like a bit of a lead balloon from Harpreet. So I think on balance, I would support the officer's recommendation to refuse based purely on the size and the footprint. So if James has moved it, I'm happy to second it. If he's not, I'll move that. Thank you.
I'll put that to the vote then.
Yeah, okay. Right, so we have a mover, which is Councillor Homewood, seconded by Councillor Aller, to accept the officer recommendation as outlined in the report. So Councillor McGuinn?
Against.
Councillor Bellamy?
Against.
Councillor Bamford?
Against.
Councillor Armour?
Against.
Councillor Lee Richards?
Support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Munro?
I support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Aller?
For.
Councillor Sawa?
Against.
Councillor Uppel?
Support the officer's
Councillor
recommendation.
Sokol?
Against.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Homewood?
For.
Councillor Lyons?
For.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against, so the officer recommendation is approved. That's it, isn't it?
Well, thank you all. That finalises it, and Chris, I don't want another meeting like this. I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I hope we have a happier New Year.